Good evening and welcome to Team Nuts and Bolts Sports as we're talking about the NFL schedule. I'm Jeff Barnes, of course, from Cover2Draft.com as well. And we have my co-host, Dominic Cherusky, all right, also on board with our analysts, Thomas Brown and Ryan Cooley, all right, talking not only about the schedule release, but each breaking it down for you which matchups and teams we think on the schedules are going to have the easier side of it or a little bit more of a challenge. Dominic, how are you feeling tonight?
I'm feeling pretty good. I'm glad we finally got everything up and running. But I'm excited to talk about this. I'm excited. We got it's a lot of things that came out. We knew who was playing who. It's now we just know when. But I think there's a lot of interesting matchups to get to.
Oh, absolutely. And we have Thomas in the house, sporting the Eagles gear as usual.
As always.
Oh, well, you know. I got to. But all jokes aside, man, we can't wait to talk about the entire schedule, all the different moves over the offseason and free agency, especially the draft. Schedule is perfect. It's perfect.
All right. And if you want to slide around to the other side of the NFC East, over there with the Washington Redskins, we got to talk to Ryan Cooley.
Oh, yeah, the Redskins, a lot of question marks with them this year. Not sure, new regime there, new head coach, new whole front office, a lot of new players. Been a respect from them, but I do like what I saw from the schedule. I do like what I saw from them.
Well, before we get to the NFC East and get all comfortable, let's jump to the opposite conference, and let's start with the AFC East, and we talk about it. Let's start there. We know the New England Patriots have run that division. Tom Brady is no longer home. He's made himself – he's actually in my backyard down here in Tampa. So let's talk about the schedule there, the changes. Who do you think has some of the tougher matchups? Whose schedule do you think actually helps them with the Patriots gone? Let's start with you, Dominic.
So it's funny we bring up the Patriots first because when I saw the schedule, the Patriots are one of the teams that I thought had probably one of the roughest schedules of anybody, which has to be a double whammy if you're, a New England faithful because you lose Tom Brady and now you have to play a hellacious schedule. There's a certain point where they're going to play, I believe it's from week 13 to 15. They have 3 straight away games, 2 of which are in Los Angeles. So the thing is, they start week 13, which is December 6th against the Chargers. That's a Sunday night game. And then they have to play the Rams that following Thursday. So they don't even get to go home.
Wow.
And then right after that, they go back. And then they have to play Miami, which New England is notoriously – Miami is a rough place for them to play. On top of that, you have Kansas City, you have Baltimore, you have San Francisco, like Seattle. New England has a hellacious schedule, and it's going to be interesting to see what Bill Belichick can do and what he can pull out of Jarrett Stidham.
Absolutely. That's going to be an interesting situation, especially we're talking about it. It's a good thing, I guess you could say, that Stidham is not a rookie. He's been there for a year, so he's familiar with the staff. He's familiar with the receivers because they didn't really make so many changes at the receiver position. So that's going to be real interesting. If you also look in that division, I think the team that's got a real interesting schedule that's going to try and knock off the Patriots and the Bills for supremacy there is the Jets. And if you look at their schedule, there's a lot of unknowns going on with the Jets. I mean, granted, they open up on the road in Buffalo, who's everybody's favorite to win that division now that Tom Brady is no longer a Patriot. But when you look at it, if you look at it, they have San Francisco week 2. They go to Indianapolis, who's an unknown. We don't know what Indianapolis is going to be like.
Right.
Then they go to Denver, who's steadily improving. So if Denver makes a leap, that's a tough schedule to come out of those first 3 games and say, okay, well, now we face the Broncos. Arizona, right? They get at least at home before they go out to San Diego, who's another mixed bag of unknowns. And then they get to see those same Bills that they saw week 1. So if it doesn't go well for them week 1, great. You got to see them week 6 all over again. And, oh, by the way, after you get out of that, you have to go to Arrowhead to face the Chiefs.
Yep.
Yeah, all right. And then finally you get to say, okay, well, we're back home for the Patriots. You know, so nowhere in their first 10 weeks of the season do you look at there and say, oh, it's a guaranteed win, because you don't really know what you're going to face for those first 10 weeks. And then you look at the back half of it, you know, they face the Dolphins after they come off their bye. They got to play the Raiders. Then they got to go to Seattle and L.A. for the Rams before they come back home to take on the Browns and then finish at Foxborough. So as much as people want to say the Jets are going to be so much better, looking at that schedule, I don't know what to expect from the Jets, because this is going to be one of those things that their opponents better be really bad or they better be playing really well, because some of these stretches just don't look really good. I mean, on paper, they look like, okay, I can anticipate this look good in a certain way. But, you know, overall, there's no way to look at the schedule and these guys are picking wins and losses. You don't know what some of these teams are. And it makes it real hard to pick them just by looking at the paper. You see anything in Ryan, you see anything in the AFC East that kind of piques your interest?
Well, the Patriots, honest to God, now that Brady's gone, I mean, I report on the Redskins and stuff. I grew up in Maryland, so I watched probably all the Redskins games for the past 10 years, but I'm a Patriots fan. So, Brady heart, but, I'm happy for him that he's in Tampa. But I look at the Patriots roster, and it's tough. I mean, they lost defensively. Everyone says, oh, they were great. That's going to get them 8 to 9 wins. But if you look, the first 8 games of last season, they had, a cupcake schedule. They were facing bad quarterbacks, and it was like they gave up only 7.5 points a game. And then the last 8 games, they gave up, I think it was like 20.5 points a game. And you add on top of that, they lost Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins, Duron Harmon, Danny Shelton, and really they one in free agency, other than the only notable one that I can think of is Adrian Phillips, who's more used as a special teamer. And then in the draft, when Belichick traded out of the first round, then his first pick was Duggar, who he looks to be Devin McCourty's replacement. And, coming from a Division II school, it might take him a little bit to adjust for the NFL. So this offseason, I really don't see where they've gotten really any better but worse. And, without Brady there, the offense is atrocious. I mean, their best player is Edelman. He's going to be 34 next year. And he's going to look like when he's Jared Stidham's thrown his way. So the Patriots, everyone talks about Bill's magic. Well, he's going to have to pull something out of his bag of tricks now, because they're in trouble.
Hey, Thomas, we saved you for last.
Of course you did. We talked about the Jets. We talked about the Patriots. I want to talk about a team that's kind of under the radar, not just for the division, but the entire league. Miami is very interesting to me. Okay, of course you start out week 1 against New England on the road, and then you have to go all the way down to Jacksonville week 2. I think Jacksonville is actually one of those teams that, they struggle. They want to trade everybody. They want to let everybody go. So now Gardner Minshew is the one to go. Okay, so that will be interesting for them. But as you see down the line, you got the Niners, Bills, Seahawks, Denver. That within itself is a 4-game stretch of playing playoff teams. Of course, aside from Denver, but Denver, when they're clicking, they play like a playoff team. So it's very challenging. I could see for Miami, but I also think with them having with a revamped offense with Tua, I think the fact that the time we're in right now gives them a whole lot of time to get more healthier. And even if you don't play him, you still got Ryan Fitzpatrick. If you want to use him for a little bit to set him up for Tua, whatever the case may be, you can address that. The defense, you got Byron Jones in the corner position. You address the linebacker position as well. So I see them actually getting a whole lot better than they did last season. But I still think that even with that being said, you have that rough stretch to start off the season. And then as the season progresses, it's just not going to get any easier.
Absolutely. We're going to jump over now to the AFC North. All right. So this time we're going to reverse it up. Thomas, who do you think in the AFC North has some interesting matchups?
You know what? I did my research. There's a team by the name of Baltimore Ravens. They have probably the easiest. I know we don't want to use the cliche term, but easy is an understatement for Baltimore. Okay? All right. We open up with the Browns week 1. Okay. And then it's just literally the only spot that they have is week 3 against Kansas City. That's one of my matchups that I want to see out of the entire year. Getting to see that rematch of Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, seeing them tear it up, will be very interesting. But after that, I mean, we were just talking about the Patriots having to pick a practically cupcake schedule last year. we might be looking at a win streak all over again. Now, of course, with Baltimore, the thing is not the regular season, but as far as what they do in the postseason, that matters the most. But it's just the rich just keeps getting richer for them. That's what
Dominic.
So I think Baltimore, their schedule to me is interesting. I don't think it's as easy as some people think, but I think that's because 2 teams in their division got significantly better. And to me, that's Pittsburgh and Cleveland. When I look at Cleveland's schedule, actually, I think Cleveland's going to have it rough in the beginning. Similar to how their season was last year, where they kind of had a rough going with teams going in the first couple of weeks. But after week 7, if you're Cleveland, you're looking at your schedule, and from week 7 on, you're saying at worst we lose 3 games. So if you can come out and win those, at least split 3, or split 3 of the first 6 games, win 3 of those, go 3-3. After that, you can end up being 10-6 at the end of the year at worst. And with an additional playoff spot there, Cleveland is going to be looking to be in the playoff mix. Like I said, from week 7 on, they play at Cincinnati, then they're against the Raiders. They get a bye week. They're home against Houston, home against Philly, at Jacksonville, at Tennessee, home for Baltimore, at New York for the Giants, at New York for the Jets, and then home against Pittsburgh. If I'm the Browns, I'm looking back and I'm saying from week 7 on, Tennessee, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, those are the only games where we should have a shot of losing. So Cleveland's schedule is really interesting. And like I said, they did everything they possibly can to make sure that Baker Mayfield is going to be successful this year. Getting him an offensive line, brought in more offensive talent when they brought in Austin Hooper. So Cleveland is gearing up to maybe be the team everyone pegged them to be last year.
Who caught your eye, Ryan?
Well, the Steelers, for me, they're a big question this year. You look, Ben's coming back. He's a little bit older, coming off major shoulder surgery, which is, a never good thing for a quarterback. Defensively, they're going to be good. Defensively, they're going to be solid. But offensively, that's where the questions are going to come in. Can Juju be the number 1 receiver? Because he had injuries last year. And when he was on the field, really didn't impress too much. They got Chase Claypool, should help. And, the receiving core is young. So it depends on how they develop. If Ben Roethlisberger can come back full strength, I have my doubts with him, especially, Jay Glazer, I think, came out this week and said that Ben's workout in the offseason isn't really but one session of yoga and drinking beer. That's so he doesn't I'm not too sure how much he can rebound after this big surgery, but it's really gonna be on Big Ben how well the Steelers play. If he can get back to his former self, then, the Steelers are in the run for the 8th. Well, you got the Ravens there, but, they can make it interesting. Down the stretch, the last couple games they have, it's not too bad. You got Buffalo. I think they're going to be decent, but then they play the Bengals, not very good. Then the Colts, I don't know how good Rivers is going to be for the Colts. And then you got the Browns, and we know what kind of show they've been in the last, 10, 20 years. So, if they can stay afloat for the beginning and middle, I think they have a chance to be good at the end, really pull out a comeback, maybe get a wild card spot, or maybe if the Ravens, fall off a little bit this year, maybe even win the division.
And when you look at that division, there was a team at the bottom of that division that drafted number 1 overall. They got their quarterback of the future. They said goodbye to their previous quarterback, and they'll get a good chance to see him and his new team later in the season. But for them, with the Bengals, it's going to be about early in the season. Any chance they have to have a really good season, it's going to start with that first 6 games. 4 of their first 6 games are on the road. Okay, they start off home for the Chargers before going on the road to Cleveland and Philadelphia. They get a chance to face Jacksonville at home before traveling to Baltimore and Indianapolis. So 4 of your first 6 games on the road, then they get a 2-game homestand before they go on their bye. But then, like I said, if they are able to hold off and have some kind of success early and try and build some momentum late, they're going to need it, because the back half of that schedule is loaded with Dallas, Pittsburgh, Houston, and Baltimore. So they got a rough last 4 games. Those teams are not going to be easy. A lot of them are going to be trying to fight for playoff positioning. So those games are going to matter down the stretch. And they're going to need to be at their best at that point of the season. So it's going to be real interesting later when it comes down to it for the Bengals, how they finish up. Let's jump over now to the AFC South. Okay. Dominic, start us off this time.
All right. So the AFC South, the team that I am looking at, although I am very interested in this division, I'm going to talk about Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
And Thomas, you alluded to this earlier. There's no way you can convince me that Jacksonville isn't tanking. They can come out and say that Gardner Minshew is their guy, and they can talk about how much, they believe in Minshew mania. That's great and all, and Minshew is great for marketing, and he will put butts in seats, but they're not going to win a lot of games this year. When you look at everything that they've done, you trade away Jalen Ramsey, you trade away A.J. Bouye, Telvin Smith retired, Yannick Ngakoue wants out. Leonard Fournette makes a comment about, hey, maybe we should bring in Cam Newton, and then he was immediately on the trading block literally the next. So everything, like, if Minshew is your guy moving forward, it would make sense that you try and surround him with talent as opposed to alienate him. Everything that I see from Jacksonville is we're tanking and we want Trevor Lawrence next year.
Yeah, that has been one really interesting non-functional situation ever since the beginning of last season, when everything went on with Tom Coughlin and Doug Marrone, and things just spiraled out of control. And so far this year, there hasn't been any righting of the ship so far. Everything is supposed to be pointed in that direction. But even with the Ngakoue saga that's been going on, it just – something in Jacksonville is amiss. I don't know if it's a dark cloud. I don't know if it's just too many chefs in the kitchen. I don't know. But something in Jacksonville's going on that just –
something down there.
Yeah, something's not going on. Something's not right. Thomas.
Let me answer it for y'all. One of 2 things. Tom Brady is in the same state. And 2, they were just in the AFC Championship game 3 years ago. 3. What else are we supposed to come up with? I mean, I'm not coming up with excuses, okay? But we talked about Jacksonville, Dominic. I'm glad you brought up the fact that they are willing to trade anybody and everybody, no matter what type of deal is involved. At least they're not the team I'm about to bring up. But I'm going to talk about the Houston Texans. Yeah, that team. Yeah, they're led by Bill O'Brien, of course. and boy, howdy, this is gonna be fun. They open up the season with Kansas City. Okay, this is the game where Kansas City get to show off their big rings that they won the Super Bowl, and to show Houston that, hey, remember that game in the divisional round where y'all had 24 and we just woke up and dropped 51 out of nowhere? Yeah. Good to see you again. Then we go from there. We got Ravens eventually. We got the Steelers. We got the Vikings. Jacksonville still there. Titans are still a thing. Okay? We're talking about a rough beginning to the season for Bill O'Brien and those Texans. I mean, it's hi. They may not get a break until Jacksonville. And even then, the next game is Tennessee. So even if you tried, there's really no ins and outs of it. I still do think that with the ability of Deshaun Watson and what he's been able to do for them over the past few years, will be able to offset some of the stuff that Bill O'Brien's done in the offseason. However, I do think that it'll be too much, and it'll be a struggle for them to just win games, period. It'll be difficult.
It's gonna be an interesting season for them. You know, you trade away Hopkins, and you do bring in Randall Cobb, but is that a fair trade-off for what you had? You know,
no, not at all. Not even close.
You know, and as much as I like Will Fuller, I mean, Will Fuller is one of those guys that's often injured. So it's going to be an interesting situation for him in Houston. Ryan.
Yeah, for the Texans, yeah. If I were Deshaun Watson, I would have walked in and said, "I'm done. Y'all need to trade." But the Titans, they're an interesting team because I'm not a fan of paying running backs, and you know they obviously Tennessee, they didn't want to let go of Derrick Henry. He was the heartbeat of their team, but I'm just not one person that believes in paying running backs a lot of money. I think they're really replaceable. But really, if you look at the Titans' schedule, though, it's not like real at the beginning it's real hard, then eases up. It's kind of balanced throughout. You know, you got the Denver Broncos, I think, week one, who, you know, I think could be pretty good with that receiving core. Then you got Jacksonville, then you got Minnesota, and then you got Pittsburgh. I don't think is going to be great next year. Then you got the Bills, and then you got the Texans, and then you got the Bengals and Bears. So it's really just not really, you know, some teams like I was looking at the Redskins, they have it really hard. The beginning and end, and the middle is not too bad. But for the Titans, it's really kind of even throughout. So, you know, we got to see what they can do. We got to say this is Ryan Tannehill. Let's see if he's a franchise quarterback. You know, I have my questions with him, but, you know, this season's going to prove it.
Gotcha. Dominic, you wanted to add something.
Well, this was just earlier about Houston. I actually, well, just talk about what Ryan, I like what Tennessee has set because they didn't lose too much. You know, for the most part, they're bringing back that same team, and that same team got them to an AFC Conference Championship. I understand, Ryan, when you say don't pay running backs because history tells us that they break down. But I feel like they should have broke off Derrick Henry, but that's just my personal opinion. As far as Houston goes, though, I wanted to say I wouldn't be surprised if this is Bill O'Brien's last year. Honestly, when you look at everything that he's done, you could truthfully say that the Texans have been winning in spite of him. The only reason Bill O'Brien still has his job is because Deshaun Watson is that good.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Amen. Amen.
They traded away DeAndre Hopkins for literally nothing. And if you think that Randall Cobb and Brandon Cooks is all it's going to take to replace him, you are gravely mistaken. But that's all I got on Houston.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those situations where he's going to be in a prove it or else situation. The sad part is we're going to all look very foolish if he's right and we're all wrong. There's going to be a lot of us eating crow on that one. It's funny when you look at the Colts. We know about this quarterback situation. Phillip Rivers comes into the mix. You still have Jacoby Brissett as his backup. And then, of course, the young draft pick of, the kid from out of Washington with the big arm. Yes, Jacob Eason. Forgive me, I'm having some timers right now. But if you look at their schedule, it doesn't start off too bad. I mean, yeah, they have Minnesota week 2, but before that, they have the Jaguars, then they have the Jets, the Bears, and then the Browns and Bengals. So they can get at least a split of those first 3 games. They have a point where they can catch some fever. Win your divisional games, most importantly, and they should be all right. Just jump over to the AFC West so we can finish up the AFC, and then let's jump head into the NFC. So the AFC West. Ryan, start us off this time.
I'm kind of interested with the Broncos this year. I love what they did in the draft. They went and got Jerry Jeudy at 15. I don't know how he was still there. He's the best route runner in this draft. And then in the second round, their next pick, they went and got KJ Hamler from Penn State. So you look at that receiving core, you got Cortland Sutton who can go up and get the ball. You got the best route runner in Jerry Jeudy. And then you got Hamler, who is just a playmaker. You just got to get him the ball. And Drew Lock, I think, has been blessed with, in his second year. They gave him really possibly the best if Jerry Jeudy works out and KJ Hamler. But really a solid receiving core. So it's going to be interesting what they can do. Starting off, they have Tennessee. That's going to be a tough game, tough matchup. Then they got the Steelers, and I keep saying the Steelers is a wild card. I don't know what to expect from them. So that could be a real difficult game if Ben's on his thing. Then they got the Buccaneers. So the first 3 games could be pretty tough because I expect high things from the Buccaneers. I know some people are saying, oh, they're just like the Browns of last year, overhyped, but I have faith in Tom Brady. He's not Baker Mayfield. Bruce Arians is not Freddie Kitchens. So I think the Bucs could be good. So you look at their first 3 games, it's kind of rough. Tennessee, Pittsburgh, and it's at Pittsburgh too, and then Tampa Bay. So they got a rough start to the schedule, and it's really going to test Drew Lock. But we're going to see what he's made of. I was a little surprised that he fell to the second round, Drew Lock, last year. I felt the Broncos got a little bit lucky, but if he can pull it off, then he's got enough weapons to do it. So we'll see.
All right. Dominic.
So I'm going to bring up, and I agree with Ryan. I'm actually really big on Denver this year. Just to kind of reiterate, I like what they did. Like I said, offensively, I think John Elway finally found his quarterback in Lock. And then when you look at the defensive side of the ball, having Bradley Chubb and Von Miller going after quarterbacks is a scary thought. So I'm big on Denver. I wouldn't be surprised to see Denver maybe be the team out of the AFC West outside of Kansas City. But the team that I do want to talk about is the Raiders. Ryan, you said that you couldn't believe that the Broncos got Jerry Jeudy at number 15. It's because the Raiders passed up on him.
Oh yeah.
And I like Mike Mayock, and I like what. I loved him when he is scouting and like his analysis, but he's made some head scratching picks in the first round, his first 2 years. So we have to see what goes on with the Raiders. Does John Gruden love Derek Carr, or is Marcus Mariota gonna Ryan Tannehill Derek Carr? So it's gonna be interesting to see what the Raiders do. When you look at their schedule, obviously, having to play Kansas City twice, it's rough. I think the Chargers are good. I think Denver's good. In all honesty, I think the Raiders are going to be the dregs of this division. It's just there's so much that they have to work through. Also, where are the Raiders going to play next season, by the way, because that stadium might or might not be finished by the time the season comes. So there's a lot of stuff that they have to figure out and shore up before we even talk about actually playing games. So I don't know. Raiders, it feels like they took a step back.
Well, I think the stadium is basically done. I think they're just finishing up the final touches on it. But for the most part, it's had its grand opening. So I think they're pretty much gone. All right, Thomas. Sorry, Zoom message came in the middle of me talking.
Okay. It's okay. You know who to blame it on. You know who to blame it. Okay. But I like the fact that we are mentioning draft selections with the AFC West because, believe it or not, the Kansas City Chiefs made sure to load up even more offensively. With getting a running back with the last pick in the first round, which I think does more help than people might not consider. You kept everybody. Mahomes is still there. You have Damian Williams at your running back position. You have Hilaire. I hope I said his name right.
Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, yep.
Yep. So you have that in your backfield. You have Tyreek Hill. You still have Sammy Watkins still there?
Oh, yeah, Sammy Watkins still there. Yep.
Sammy's back.
Like, I can go on and on. And Andy Reid's your head coach, okay? So just think about that for a second. You have Houston, that team we brought up earlier. Yeah, we got them week 1, okay? Then, of course, you got a divisional game with the Chargers, which I think is going to be very interesting because I think Justin Herbert, believe it or not, will bring some energy to the – no pun intended to the Chargers. So I think that'll be an interesting game. Then, of course, you got the Ravens week 3. You got the Patriots week 4. So we're talking about a stretch with the Kansas City Chiefs where we might be talking about them not necessarily running the table again, but getting to their groove early on. And you know how it is with Kansas City. When they get into any type of groove, it's very hard to stop. Very hard.
Yep, ask the Texans.
Ask anybody they saw in the playoffs.
Anybody.
Oh, man.
Yeah. You know, and then when you talk about those Chargers, it's going to be real interesting whether it's Tyrod Taylor or if it's Herbert. No matter who's starting for them, they don't have a really bad first couple of games. There's a lot of unknowns, much like certain other teams. I mean, they're going to get the Bengals in Cincinnati week 1, but then they get to see those Chiefs. So, I mean, but after that, they're home again after they play the Chiefs to play the Panthers, who are another team, new coach, new quarterback, in flux. So that's going to be one of the things how these teams start out is going to lead into later in their schedule because, they see the Chiefs week 2, but then they don't see them again to the last game of the season where they have all division opponents 3 games in a row, the Raiders, Broncos, and Chiefs. So they could afford to lose some games early as long as they're not division games, but that back end is where they can make it up. Let's jump over to the NFC side and start with the NFC West, and we'll finish up with our favorite division last. So, all right, we'll go NFC West. All right, Dominic, start us off.
So NFC West, and when it comes to the NFC West, the team that I am actually – this is probably like the team I'm most excited to see this upcoming season other than the Buccaneers with Tom Brady, obviously. But the Arizona Cardinals, credit to them for absolutely fleecing Bill O'Brien and getting DeAndre Hopkins for pennies, basically. But I'm interested to see, what that team is going to look like. Kyler Murray looked really good last year. I would have loved for them to have gotten some offensive line help for him because far too often he was scrambling for his life. But he's a small, fast guy, so he can kind of get away with it for a little while. But I still think they need to get him some protection. But when you look at the weapons that he has, DeAndre Hopkins, Larry Fitzgerald, I'm a big fan of Christian Kirk. I like what they're doing. Cliff Kingsbury's offense started to click. And when you looked at Arizona last year, they kind of started off and it was like, okay, whatever. They were a bad team. But then as the season progressed, you kind of saw, okay, the system started to work and they started to give some teams some real struggles. And they were a tough out last season. I think that they only got better. I love them drafting Isaiah Simmons. I think it was a blessing that he fell to them. So when you look at that, I think Arizona might surprise a lot of people this upcoming season.
Gotcha. Thomas.
Well, the reigning NFC champions are still in that division. Of course, I'm talking about those San Francisco 49ers. Yes, they lost to Forrest Buckner and let him go to the Indianapolis Colts. Yeah. That defense is still good, okay? Jimmy Garoppolo is still your quarterback. I'm actually one of the few that believes that he is not one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but I think he's in the top tier 2, okay? He's still good for what he brings to the table, okay? You have arguably the best tight end in George Kittle. I was going to say Travis Kelce. Forgive me. But then you still have an offensive line that lost some bits, especially with a retirement with please correct me on this one.
Joe Staley.
Thank you, Staley. We're talking about a veteran that had a huge piece in that offensive line, the Stillman in that offensive line for years. He's now gone. So what are you going to do with that position? We have to see about that one. But like I said, defense is still lethal. The offense is still good. Okay, and I believe Mike Shanahan, he just getting some bad luck. Okay, you in Atlanta, you can't keep a lead. You in San Francisco, you can't keep a lead. Okay, it's not going to work. But just going with the 49ers schedule, we start off with the Cardinals, as talked about earlier. I think that's going to be, I'm just throwing it out there, probably one of the best games of the year. Okay, I'm not talking about maybe a shootout or anything like that, but I'm just talking about just playing two offenses that are put together on one field to say, hey, take us there. Let's get a W at the beginning of the season. How are we going to start off the season? I think that's going to be a statement type of game for them, especially in the division. Okay, and I'm going to go all the way down to week 4 because why not? You're playing Philly, okay? Of course, you're at home. But I believe that when you're surging against teams prior to Philly with Giants and Jets, that when Philly does come to town, yes, it will be interesting, but I think that the Niners will start surging within that stretch. So it'll be very interesting to see how they play out. Like I said, I think with Staley being retired, I think it does a huge damage to that offensive line. But we'll see. We'll see.
Well, they might actually have a tackle surplus now because remember they did draft McGlinchey top 10. They made the trade during the draft for Trent Williams, and they also drafted a tackle too. So, they might actually have a tackle surplus. Ryan.
Yeah, Dominic talked about the Cardinals. And that's the team I'm really excited to watch. I think they're going to take a big step forward this year. Obviously, they got DeAndre Hopkins, and another big thing, they got rid of David Johnson's contract, which was huge. And you look at the schedule, they rough starting off the first week. They got San Francisco, but the next 4 games, you got Washington, Detroit, Carolina, and the Jets. So those are 4 games. I think they could really start 4-1. And you get that little boost of confidence, and it can help you with those tougher games. And of course, they drafted Isaiah Simmons. I don't know how he fell to them, and I do like that they didn't. I know some people wanted them to take a tackle, but I do like taking talent, especially in the top 10 over need. And Isaiah Simmons, of course, obviously their defense needed help too. So you got the addition of Isaiah Simmons, DeAndre Hopkins, getting rid of David Johnson. They're also keeping Kenyon Drake. Christian Kirk, I think, could take a big step up. And, of course, you have the veteran Larry Fitzgerald and the benefit of a pretty easy first 5 weeks other than the 49ers. The Cardinals could shock a lot of people.
Indeed. And don't forget you have that perennial team that's always been if they're not winning the division, they're hanging around the top of it in the Seattle Seahawks, who don't have a really, really daunting opening part of the schedule, but it's not going to be easy either. They open up at Atlanta, then they're home for the Patriots and Cowboys before going to Miami for some nice warm weather after leaving the Pacific Northwest. They come back home, play the Vikings, and get an early bye. But they do have, once again, we talk about the back half of their schedule being division heavy. Last 2 games of the year, they're home for the Rams, and they end up at San Francisco. So Seattle's going to – more about the meat of their schedule is going to be the beginning. Great start. It should carry them through the middle, and then those big games at the end of it. Let's try the NFC South. Let's start with Ryan this time.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. Of course, I said, Patriots, man, I gotta show my appreciation to Brady. I hope he kills it down there. But when I looked at their schedule, I was actually surprised. It's pretty easy. Of course, we say it's easy and hard. We don't know what teams are going to look like. But we see, I think the two hardest games, three hard games. You got the Saints twice, which I think they could easily win one. But then you also got the Chiefs, and those are really. Other than that, it's games I really think they could win. And they start off, against the Saints. I think that could be a loss there. But then they play them in Week 9, Sunday Night Football. I expect Brady and his receivers to be connected and have a little bit of chemistry, and I think they could be able to pull that one off at home too. But after the Saints, you have the Carolina Panthers, then you have the Broncos, and I like the Broncos. I like what I think they can do next year. But early on, I have questions. Then you have the Chargers, the Bears, the Packers, who helped Rodgers absolutely none in this draft. I'm not too sure how well they're going to do next year. Then you got the Raiders, the Giants. They got to really, like I said, in Week 8 we may be talking a different story with some opponents that are better than we thought, but they really have an easy schedule, and you can't talk enough about their offense, how loaded they are with Brady, Evans, Godwin, Gronkowski, Howard. Great. I mean, it just doesn't end. It doesn't end. It's night and day from what he had in New England to what he has in Tampa Bay. Really excited to see if he can pull it off. The ageless wonder can do it again. I'm hoping he can. But they're also benefited by that, as of right now, easy schedule.
Gotcha. Thomas.
Well, I just want to take a little break to let y'all know Mother's Day is this weekend. Let your mother know, okay, that you love them, okay? Because I am taking the New Orleans Saints. We're going to talk about them. That's my mom's favorite team, of course. All right. You open up with the Buccaneers, okay? Ryan just finished talking about the amount of weapons that they bring to the table, okay? However, I like the fact that they addressed need on the offensive line during the draft. Yes, it was questionable with the pick itself, but I do think that with Sean Payton and him understanding what needs to be done with that offensive line, I think he'll get that taken care of to protect Drew Brees. So I think that within itself will be interesting as far as the Buccaneers. Then you have the Raiders, which who are they really outside of their offense? And then you have the Packers, where Brian just said they didn't help Rodgers at all. And then, of course, you go on throughout the rest of the season. You have Lions, Chargers, Panthers. We don't know who they are. Just a lot of question marks throughout the season. I'm not saying it's going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. However, I do think the Saints will start picking it up, especially around the Panthers game for sure. They'll start picking it up, start taking games at home because that's what they love to do. And then once we get near the end of the season, it'll be interesting for sure.
Gotcha. Dominic.
So when I saw the schedules come out, one of the schedules that really popped out to me was Carolina. And I don't know who the Panthers upset, but it was rough. Like, when I look at the Panthers, obviously you're in the NFC South, so you have to play Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers twice. You have to play Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints twice. And then you have to play the Atlanta Falcons with Matt Ryan and the wealth of talent that they have on the offensive side of the ball. If they can stay healthy on the defensive side of the ball, I think the Falcons will be a better team. But you have 6 games right there against teams that should be vying for a playoff spot. And then on top of those 6 games in your division, they have 4 games this year that 3 of which of those teams were playoff teams. The other one is the Chargers, who I think will be much improved this year. But the thing is, those 4 games are all away games. So the Panthers, after having to play 6 games against, their division, have to see Kansas City in Arrowhead, have to see Green Bay in Lambeau, have to see Minnesota, and have to see the Chargers in Los Angeles. That's really, really, really rough. And in all honesty, that could be 10 losses right there, like easily. It's going to be a tough first year for, Joe Brady and not Joe Brady, I'm sorry, Joe Judge as the offensive coordinator there. It's going to be a tough first year for Teddy Bridgewater. And then when you look at that defense, they still have a lot to replace. Carolina, I think, is going to have a rough year inside the division and on the road.
It's funny. The Atlanta Falcons, their season is going to really hinge on a couple of different segments of their schedule. Their first 4 games, I don't envy at all. They start out at home against Seattle. Then they go to Dallas. Then they're home again for the Bears before traveling to Green Bay. And then they finally get their first divisional game in Carolina, who they see 3 weeks later. But then with their division opponents, they're all separated by a week or 2. So Carolina is the most split of the 2. The Saints, they play in another sandwich. It's the Saints, Raiders, Saints. And then when you look at the end of the last 3 games of the season, it's Bucks, Chiefs, Bucks. So they have a really tough schedule, especially because your division opponents are so close together, and it's the same team so close together. So this could be really interesting. Let's move on now to the NFC North. Hopefully Thomas will get back on. Start us off this time, Dominic.
So the NFC North, you know what? I'm going to talk about the Green Bay Packers. And it seems like the Packers' approach to the draft was, how many ways can we upset Aaron Rodgers? You go out and you draft Jordan Love, and a lot of people probably are like, oh, well, it's that's what they did to Brett Favre. Not exactly. The situations, while they look similar on the surface, there's actually a lot of things that are different. One, the Packers traded up to get Jordan Love, so it's showing some sort of vested interest. Like, no, we want him. Aaron Rodgers just kind of fell in their lap back in the day. However, I still think, maybe that motivates Aaron Rodgers. You didn't get him a wide receiver in what is one of the most, I would say, probably the deepest wide receiver draft class that we've seen in X amount of years. And if you think that, Devin Funchess is that guy, I'm not sold on him. But when you look at their schedule, they've got a rough first 8 games. You open up the season at Minnesota. I think Minnesota is going to win the NFC North. Personally, I think the Vikings win that division. You have a home game against Detroit. Then after Detroit, you're at New Orleans. That's a rough one. You're home against Atlanta. That's pretty cool. You get a bye week. Then you got to go see Tampa Bay, down in Tampa. You got to see Tom Brady. You got to see Gronk. You got to see Mike Evans. That's going to be a wild game. That's one of the big matchups I want to see. I can't wait to see Aaron Rodgers versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Then you have at Houston. While I am down on Houston, I do still think that they will be a rough team to beat. And then you have Minnesota again. And then you have the 49ers, NFC Conference Championship rematch, where they gave up over, 186 yards rushing before contact.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got a rough schedule. I do think that they will still be a good team. They're, like I said, Aaron Rodgers is that good, and maybe, them drafting Jordan Love gives him a little bit of a spark. Maybe it sets a fire under him, so that way he kind of goes out there with a scorched earth mentality. But they've got a rough opening. It eases up for them later on in the season, so that's where you could probably see them start to rattle off wins. Week 10 they get Jacksonville, then Indy, then Chicago, then Philly, then Detroit, then Carolina. So they've got a pretty nice stretch to end the season where they could rattle off wins. So if they can just make it through that opening, those first 9 weeks, if they can make it through that, they should be right in the thick of things.
Gotcha. Ryan.
Yeah, for the Bears, I'm going to look at them. I think everyone can say they're excited when they hear about Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles quarterback competition. That's going to be fun to watch. But no, seriously, I don't think the Bears, I don't have a whole lot of hope for them just because of their quarterback situation. I've always said when you're going into the season without a designated number 1 quarterback, you're not going to be good next that year. I mean, you look at the Redskins last year; they didn't know with Dwayne Haskins the starter. They had an open quarterback competition: Haskins, Keenum, and it just doesn't work. You should come in with a designated quarterback, and I think Jacksonville should do that. Whether that's Trubisky or that's Foles, I personally would take Foles. Not that I would be happy with Foles, but I think it's a little bit of an upgrade from Trubisky. But I will say they do benefit a little bit. Their first 8 games. There's only 2 opponents that I would say is going to give them a really rough time. They start off at Detroit, which I think, not the Lions aren't going to be – I don't have a whole lot of high hopes for Detroit next year.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got the Giants, the Falcons, the Colts. Then you have a break Tampa Bay. That's going to be difficult. Then you have the Panthers, the Rams, and then you have the Saints. So really 2 out of their, first 8 games is what I would say rough. So I think they're somewhat winnable. It's all going to depend on – if Nick Foles because I think he'll end up actually winning the quarterback competition. But if Nick Foles can, go back to what he was in Philadelphia, maybe, my heart breaks for someone like Allen Robinson who, started his career with Blake Bortles and now he's Trubisky and now he's got a quarterback competition between Trubisky and Foles, but the Bears, it's really going to depend if Nick Foles can pull off the magic again. I don't have high hopes for it.
Well, go ahead.
On the Bears. So I have a little bit of a theory on the Bears. I think Ryan Pace knows that he's kind of he's on the hot seat.
Mm-hmm.
They don't pick up Mitchell Trubisky's 5th-year option. And I always thought that bringing in Nick Foles was interesting. My theory on that is Ryan Pace brought in the only person Mitchell Trubisky has any chance of beating in a quarterback competition. Because if you would have brought Cam Newton or Andy Dalton or Jameis Winston or Teddy Bridgewater, we know for a fact they're going to blow Mitchell Trubisky out of the water. I think if you're Ryan Pace, all of the assets I gave up to get Mitchell Trubisky, and if he doesn't pan out, there's no way they keep me here. So I think this is kind of him pulling a little bit of a farce saying, oh, look, we got a quarterback competition. But it's like we got the guy who's coming off of an injury and lost his job to Gardner Minshew, who was, a 6th, 7th round pick last year. So it gives the appearance of quarterback competition, but they're doing their best to try and make Mitchell win behind the scenes.
Gotcha. And, it's real interesting when you talk about that situation. You would want, especially since I believe they denied his 5th-year option, so he's going to be a free agent after this year. The amount of money that you wind up absorbing with the Nick Foles contract, you're kind of at the point where if he doesn't beat out Trubisky, what situation are you in? I mean, other than going to draft a quarterback next year, it's going to be real interesting for the Bears. There's a lot of pressure on them. You're right. This year, they make something happen. Otherwise, there's going to be some wholesale changes there. And if you stay in that division, Detroit is in a similar situation. Aging veteran quarterback in Matthew Stafford, coming off a season where you lost him due to injury, he's going to come back strong, and he's got to come out and face a pretty decent schedule. They get those Bears week 1. Before traveling to Green Bay week 2 and then to Arizona, but then they run into a buzzsaw known as the New Orleans Saints. So, and then they get that early bye week. The question is after that, can they stay healthy? Because if they're able to get off to a solid start, stay healthy and start with a healthy Stafford, put up numbers and that defense play better, they might have a chance to pull off a wild card spot because you look at their schedule after that, they're at Jacksonville. Nobody's really thinking highly of Jacksonville right now. Atlanta, are they going to be improved? Or are they going to be the same? Indianapolis is going to be one of those things where if they turn around in time. Then they got Minnesota, Washington, Carolina. And you look at that and back at half of their skis, and you don't see a lot of teams that had losing records last year, that are projected to have a rough season. I mean, they're going to have Tampa Bay late. They're going to have Minnesota late in the season. They're going to have the Titans before they play those 2 teams. Oh, and those same Green Bay Packers that they played week 2. So the NFC North is going to be one of those things where if you're not playing well, most of their schedules are set up where you don't have much room to recover and pick up momentum later on. You better play well early and somehow stay healthy enough to compete towards the back half of your schedule, because none of them really have a weak schedule towards the back half. And you don't have a picture for Thomas. But Thomas, you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. So we're going to talk about the fun division, the NFC East.
Oh, boy.
All right. So since you're back, let's get you first. Eagles.
Oh, boy. Okay. I'm going to let all that Jalen Hurts slander come in. Y'all can take your time. Take your time. I'll let it all come in now so I can get it all out the way.
Hey, listen, I thought that was a great pick, Thomas.
I do too, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, because when I was actually on for the second and third rounds, I was on another podcast, and they made that pick. And people were going, why? And then I pretty much explained it. But if you're ready, Thomas, I'll let you go. Then I'll explain why it was a great pick.
Okay. So, by the way, I'm still working on an article that should be coming out soon on just the analysis of the entire Eagles draft. Okay. The draft wasn't as bad as every single Eagles fan hypes it up to be. I think we addressed some key needs. We just didn't address another corner to have another side of Darius Slade that we added in the offseason. But I also think we addressed the slot corner with Nicky Roby-Coleman, okay? And then you have the secondary, which I love the pick of Kevon Wallace out of Clemson. I think he provides so much into the back end where he doesn't have to necessarily be involved in terms of the passing game, but in terms of Jim Schwartz and his defense and how he just wants everybody to be positionless, he can have a huge impact in that. I think also with Will Parks being in the safety spot, I think that helps. Jalen Mills in the safety spot, I think that helps. So we're talking about a defense that's been improved some way, somehow, without having much of draft capital in the cornerback position, okay? And then we go to the offense, of course. You got Carson Wentz. I love the guy, okay? But I think, me personally, the pick behind Hurts wasn't a shot at Wentz. We are taking into consideration his health. And granted, I'm not going to use the injury-prone term, okay? Because some of the hits that Wentz has taken wasn't on him, okay? So I'm not going to label that term on him. However, we have to have some type of stability in that quarterback room. And I think that's what Hurts is. Okay, Jeffrey, Jeff, you can talk more about that. But as far as the Eagles schedule itself, boy, howdy, this is going to be fun. Okay, because we start off with Washington in that right, Ryan. Okay, that's week one. All right, and now I'm gonna go to one of my favorite games of the year, because this is a game that not everybody's talking about, and that's fine, but this will date back to the playoffs from last year as well. The game, week 12, Seattle at home, a rematch of the wild card game this past season. I think it will be so interesting how that turns out. Okay, whether it's Wentz or it's Hurts, whether it's the combination of the two, okay? You still have Rager at your wide receiver position. You still have Miles Sanders at your running back spot. You still have – you brought back Corey Clement. I didn't even see that coming, okay? You still have Deshaun. You still have Alshon, all right? You have a multitude of weapons. Marquise Goodwin you traded for from San Francisco. I think that helps a lot, okay? But in terms of how the season turns out for Philly, I think we're talking about a good year where perhaps I'm not going to toot the horn too much, but it might be the first time in forever where we might have back-to-back division winners from Philly.
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, we'll go to the dissenting opinion in Ryan Cooley and the Washington Redskins.
Yeah, for the Redskins, I mean, obviously you can say the Eagles had a lot more, dependable to win than the Redskins. And honest to God, I don't know what to expect from the Redskins this year. There's been so much change. I'm not, because usually I give like a record what I think they could go. I'm not even going to do that this year. They could, go 3-13. They could go, 9-7 possibly. They could get somewhere in the middle. I really don't know. The Redskins, Ron Rivera doesn't even know how good this team is. He's had a full offseason to kind of build it his way, but, it takes more than one offseason to build a team the way you want it. And if you look at the Redskins' schedule, it's it's pretty tough to start out. You got, the Eagles, then the Cardinals, who I think are going to be really good. Then you got the Browns, who I don't know how good they are, but the roster is still loaded. And then, of course, you got the Ravens week 4. But after those first 4 weeks, then the Redskins' schedule begins to open up. And I think if they can kind of find their identity, find out who they are in those first 4 weeks, they're kind of benefited from that easier schedule down the middle. And then, the last 4 weeks is rough too. You got the 49ers, the Seahawks, then you have the Panthers, but then you also have Philly. So hopefully in that middle they can find out who they are. They gain some confidence, beating some easier teams, hopefully, and maybe be prepared for the last 4 games. And then Ron Rivera's history of the last, I think it was, I saw a stat today. It was like November, December, and then January. Ron Rivera has a pretty solid winning record. So it shows the teams get better as the season goes on. And hopefully the Redskins can do that. Like I said, I don't have high expectations for them. I just want to see that it's nice to finally have stability there. Been so dysfunctional with Bruce Allen and all that crap. It was nice to see, Kyle and Ron Rivera having, like, you could tell they, had the same thought process, and they wanted the same thing. They wanted to build the team the same way. When the media asked them questions, they had the same answer, even if they weren't side by side. So it's at least relieving to know that you have stability in the front office. Now, hopefully they can put that onto the field and we can see some success. Now, like I said, I don't have high hopes. Some people, I saw some Redskins fans say, oh, yeah, they can go 10-6, 11-5. I wouldn't go that far, but, it's really an open thing. Not sure how they're going to do, but I would just like to see some progress. Of course, much progress from last year as you had the second overall pick. So not going to take too much to be better. But for the Redskins, yeah, I just, as if you're a Redskins fan, don't have high expectations for them. Just it's more of a wait and see game.
Dominic, tell us about the Giants.
So New York, I feel for the Giants because when I look at their schedule, right. Well, let's look at the team first. Daniel Jones, while was a surprising pick, showed some good things last year. I still think he needs to take a bunch of step forwards, but he showed some promise. You still have Saquon Barkley, who, for my money, is probably the best running back in the league. I would like to see them get another dynamic wideout. They traded away Odell Beckham Jr. Now you have Sterling Shepard. You have Evan Ingram. I would like for them to get another weapon for him on the outside, but that defense still needs to be shored up. But they got a little bit of an offensive line in front of Daniel Jones now. The Giants they're trending in the right direction, I believe. This schedule just doesn't really do them any favors. You open up the season against Pittsburgh. I know, Ryan, you aren't. You're kind of iffy on Pittsburgh. And this might just be, my bias. I am a Steeler fan. Hold on. Let me get it in there. Yeah. We're here with it. But when you look at Pittsburgh, they're a team that went 8-8 last year with third and fourth string quarterbacks. If you can get Ben and that offense, Ben doesn't even have to be great. If that offense can just be middle of the pack with that defense, I think Pittsburgh is a stud team. After Pittsburgh, for the Giants, you go to Chicago to take on that Bears defense, and we'll see what the Bears offense look like with Nick Foles there. Then you have a pretty rough stretch right here of 3 games where you play the San Francisco 49ers, then you play the Rams in Los Angeles. I think the Rams are going to do everything they can to take a step forward because they took a huge step backwards last year. And then after that, you play Dallas, who that offense is going to give a lot of defensive coordinators nightmares this upcoming season. Yeah. Then you play Washington. You're at Philly. You got to play Tampa Bay. You're at Washington again. You got to play Philly again. Then you get a bye week. You really don't get, if you're the Giants, you really don't get a game where you might be the favorite to win until week 12 when you play at Cincinnati. And then after that, you have Seattle, Arizona, Cleveland, Baltimore, Dallas. So when you look at their schedule, really you sit back and say they're only probably the favorite in one game. That's a rough place to be if you're the Giants. Like I said, I think they are trending in the right direction. It's just this schedule does not do them any favors.
Understandable, and I think the division has improved overall. And we were talking about the pick of Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia. The reason, well, I don't know. Granted, I understand where Eagles fans are coming from. You just paid your quarterback $100 million, but he's had injuries where he's missed significant time. Granted, Nick Foles just seemed to be the right guy for them, but Nick Foles isn't coming back. But Jalen Hurts gives you the ability to bring in a guy who has almost the exact skill set that your starter has, which is a godsend, because then you don't have to change your offense for your backup. The guy just goes out there and you continue to play football. But when you look at that division, one of the teams that's always in a mix for that division is, of course, the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm going to tell you what, with all of the improvements that team has made, the one thing they cannot do this year that they had last year is have a slump. To start out the season at the Rams is going to be a tough matchup. Then to come home for Atlanta is going to be a tough matchup before going right back out west to Seattle. All right, so after those first 3 games, they get the Giants, Browns, Giants, Cardinals all in a row at home before traveling to Washington and Philadelphia to kick off the NFC schedule. They're home for the Steelers. And then comes that big stretch that Dallas has. The downfall of playing that home game on Thanksgiving Day is you have to travel to Minnesota right before you play it. You're home for the Redskins before playing Thursday night in Baltimore. And then you get the 10 days off before you go to Cincinnati. So 3 games on the road in 4 games. 3 games on the road out of 4. 3 games in a 12-day span, which is a tough thing to put any team through. And that's one thing they have to deal with almost every year, So, and since Thomas, I can't see you right now, but you can see me, I'm going to put this one up for you. But all right, so we're going to round this off real quick. Going around the room, Thomas, give me 2 teams, one from each conference that you think is going to make an improvement and make the playoffs this year.
Ooh, easy. Arizona, and let's go with Pittsburgh. Shoot. I'm just going right off the bat.
Okay. Dominic.
So in the AFC, I'm going to go the Chargers. I like the improvements that they've made. I think Tyrod Taylor there. And then obviously with the Chargers, the whole question is, when does Justin Herbert take over? But I could definitely see the Chargers being there and fighting for a playoff spot. And then in the NFC, Thomas, you stole mine with the Cardinals. It's okay. In the NFC, you know what? I'm going to show them a little bit of love. I think they're going to get it together, and just with the amount of talent that they have on both sides of the ball, specifically offensively, I'm going to show some love to the Falcons. I think, especially with now there being 7 teams making it into the playoffs, the Falcons have a real shot to get in there and make some noise.
Ryan.
All right, NFC, I'm definitely going with my boy Brady once again. Even just Brady, even if they didn't get Gronkowski, Brady, Winston had, I think it was 33 turnovers last year, but they went 7-9, and 6 of those games they lost were by 1 score. So that's going to help just limiting the turnovers. I don't imagine Brady's going to have 33 turnovers. So I think that, along with getting Gronkowski and all that, and of course they got their left tackle in the draft, which Tristan Wirfs, he was my 3rd-ranked tackle. I think they got a real chance. Of course, I said it before, but people saying, oh, the Browns are just like the Browns, overhyped. They're just different. But like I said, Bruce Arians is not Freddie Kitchens, and Tom Brady sure as hell not Baker Mayfield. And then for AFC, I'm going to say the Broncos. I just love – usually John Elway has been really disappointed in the draft, but I think he killed it this year. Wide receivers have never been more important, and this year he got, in my opinion, the best in Jerry Jeudy. And then also KJ Hamler. I like how he doubled up. Really get Drew Lock a lot of help. And you got Bradley Chubb and you got Von Miller. The defense is going to be solid. So I think the Broncos could surprise a lot of people.
Absolutely. I'm going to join you on the Broncos train. I think those young players are going to come on later in the year and really get that offense to flourish at the right time. I think the first part of the season, they're going to find a way to win some games. They're going to lose a couple in the process, but especially with the expanded playoff, they're going to find their way in. I mean, when you look at that offense, Drew Lock came on late in the season. We know about the running game with Phillip Lindsay. Of course, we know Cortland Sutton's there. Jerry Jeudy being added to the mix. Hamler, I'm still worried about the drops, but I'll tell you what, the guys that are going to make even more of a difference than KJ Hamler is going to be Noah Fant and Alberto Agbuanum. Okay, I always butcher that last name.
That's a hell of a last name.
Yes, right. Remember, Drew Lock has a history with him in Missouri, and he flourished under Drew Lock. He struggled when Drew Lock left. Also, on the NFC side, I'm not buying the Cardinals just yet for a playoff spot, even though it's going to expand. I think the NFC East teams, whoever's second is going to sneak in ahead of them. I think there'll be a North team and a South team that's sneaking ahead of them as well. And, of course, there's the West. But when I look at that side of the conference, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if Stafford comes back and they start playing well, that somehow, some way, the Dolphins, the Detroit Lions sneak in as that last wild card. They have a schedule where they can find wins and pull some out. And Matthew Stafford has an ability to win games at the end of the game. So don't be surprised if Detroit somehow sneaks into that picture and sneaks in as a wild card.
Yeah, I've always been, felt like Matthew Stafford's got a bad rap. Being in Detroit, I think, hurt him a little bit, but I've always thought he's been underrated. And, they talked that they could get rid of him and, maybe draft Tua. I thought was kind of disrespectful. For just kind of been in a bad organization. But if Stafford can stay healthy, yeah, the Lions, I agree with you, could be a team that sneaks in. I remember at the beginning of last season, people were talking about, they had some tough losses, but they were a team that were playing other teams tough.
All right. Well, for Team Nuts and Bolts Sports, we'd like to wrap this up by saying thank you for watching. Look for more content coming out. Also come to Nuts and Bolts Sports. We see all of these guys writing up their work. For Dominic Chereski, for Ryan Cooley, for Thomas Brown, I'm Jeff Barnes signing off.
All right.
Have a good night.
Good
night, guys.